Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. From discussions on the latest breakthroughs in AI, biotechnology, and space exploration, the Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds. Get ready to be informed and inspired as we consider the positive impact of emerging technologies on humanity. Without further ado, welcome your host, Dr. Awesome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Futurist Society, where we are talking in the present, but talking about the future. Today, we have Dan Turchin. He's a CEO of PeopleReign, which is an AI company, but really a thought leader in the space of AI, the future of work. He actually has a podcast called AI and the Future of Work, which is doing really cool things and talking to really cool people. So, Dan, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate you being here. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at PeopleReign and also how you got into the AI space.
Yeah, hey, Dr. Awesome. Pleasure to be here. Fan of the podcast. Thanks for the good work that you do.
Thanks, man.
So by background, I've been in and around the space of applying AI and machine learning to improving work life for employees for 25 years. PeopleReign's the 7th company that I've started in and around kind of pursuing that mission. And I firmly believe that my why, the reason I was put on this planet, is to positively impact work life for 1 billion employees. And I will say I'm not quite there, but I will get there. And the team at PeopleReign is incredibly motivated and passionate. We wake up every morning excited to create value and help employees bring their best selves to work. PeopleReign is an AI-first platform that automates the delivery of employee service. So we firmly believe that when you take out all the friction at work, the things that you hate doing, then you know what's left? The things you love doing. And there's a reason that everyone, signed up to do their job. And, it's not because they like the mundane parts of the job, or they like to submit PTO requests, or, check the balance of their 401k. They signed up to do something that they're passionate about. And we believe that using technology can bring out the humanness in everyone. And we think that when we do that times 1 billion, we've put a little dent in the universe that will create a lot of positive energy for the planet. Mm-hmm. I've also invested in about 30 AI first companies. So I'm a firm believer that there are a lot of approaches, and I'm always inspired by the entrepreneurs that I have, whose journeys I have a chance to be a part of. And as you mentioned, my passion project is AI and the Future of Work, where we've published about 250 conversations with amazing thought leaders, technologists, futurists, academics, entrepreneurs. And I really am proud of that corpus of conversations. When I look back over the arc of those conversations, it's kind of shaped a lot of what I think. And certainly it's why I am an AI optimist. It's why I am firmly on Team Human, and happy to share any of those perspectives with you in the audience.
Yeah. So, I think that when people think about the future of work, the thing that they're most worried about is that AI is going to replace their job. And I look at it in a much more optimistic light. I think similar to what you're saying is that it's going to take away all the mundane aspects so we can revert back to just enjoying what it is that we do, and then having robots or machines do all the stuff that we don't want to do. But, you're very close to the ground with this kind of stuff. What would you say to those people that feel like that? And what are some indications that make you feel like this is going in a similar direction to what you said, a more beneficial direction?
Yeah, first and foremost, I believe that anything that can be predicted is better left to machines, but anything that requires rational thinking or judgment or empathy, it is and always will be better left to humans. That part of work can't be outsourced to a bot. I believe that AI, machine learning, and bots, physical or digital bots, are well suited to do tasks that consist of 3 types of, three kind of canonical elements. They're either dull, dirty, or dangerous. And those kinds of tasks, weren't really well designed for humans. I want to rapidly approach a point where no human is ever sent out to drill oil on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean. No human is ever sent out into a minefield to detect where the mines are. And for lack of good technology, humans have been doing those jobs for decades, centuries, perhaps even millennia, maybe not the mine detonation part, but we need to shift the paradigm and realize that a tight collaboration between humans and machines is really what's required to bring out the best in humans and dedicate tasks, jobs, careers to a combination of machines and humans, and not ever feel like that's like some kind of creepy dystopian world. Like, that's a beautiful world when humans are doing the stuff that makes us most human. And so when we think about job elimination, I'll be the first one to say, jobs that fit in those three categories that I mentioned, maybe they're good candidates for elimination. But the other kinds of careers and opportunities that they'll spawn for technicians who manage what the robots do on an oil rig, or analysts who look at the data and tune the algorithms. I mean, there are massive numbers of more interesting, more fulfilling jobs that will be created in the wake of replacing some of those that are dull, dirty, and dangerous with machines.
I agree with you. I think that I just don't really have a good answer for people that are worried about the negative aspects about how AI will affect their day-to-day, affect their job. Are they going to be replaced by a robot? What would you say to people like that? I mean, I totally agree with you that I think that some of the more dangerous jobs should be replaced, but what about a desk clerk that realistically could be, like, when we have artificial general intelligence, realistically that is somebody that could be replaced by artificial general intelligence, and that person's probably worried about what their job security is. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be so disruptive. If it is disruptive, I think that it's going to present new opportunities, but that's just my belief. And I don't have the same kind of access that you do. So what would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, I speak all over the world to audiences of executives and leaders, but also frontline workers. And my advice is that anyone who's in a role, maybe it's, someone who's in a traditional kind of desk job, or other, perhaps, in a dangerous job in a factory, or, like the other ones I mentioned. This is a very good opportunity, a good time in history to step back and say, if my job is that easily automated by a machine, because basically what I'm doing is, pattern matching at scale, or something that's highly repetitive, now might be a good time for me to think about, reskilling and upskilling, but not in a way that should make me fear the future, in a way that should make me be optimistic about the fact that I can reinvent myself and potentially do something that's more exciting. Because I guarantee you, no kid in school grew up being super passionate about wanting to, screw, tubes on caps on tubes of toothpaste all day, or, fasten the bolts and, in the chassis of an automobile on an assembly line. Like, frankly, this is a good opportunity to think about, what's that passion, that skill that you always wanted to take up. Now's a good time to be thinking about reskilling and upskilling. And then with respect to, that's more kind of a white collar kind of thing, but with respect to white collar jobs, AI, as I implied earlier, it's very well suited for doing tasks, but it's not well suited for doing jobs. So there always needs to be, particularly in a corporate setting, there always needs to be a human orchestrating across the tasks that machines may do well. And as I alluded to, empathy and coaching and rational thinking. If there's nothing that as a society, we've learned more than the past year of, hyperventilating and experimenting over LLMs, it's that we can't rely on their output. So that kind of, that pattern of next word prediction, it's great at generating credible nonsense, but I don't want a bunch of human employees replaced by anything that I've ever seen come out of an LLM. So again, firmly on team human, because I understand what the capabilities are, but also what the boundaries are of what the technology is capable of doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's going to be an adjunct to humanity, and I think that we're always going to be some sort of quality control when it comes to its output. But I think that the fears that people have are real, and as people like us who are optimistic about the future, I think that we have to address them and give them some sort of credible answer. And so the way that I look at it is that like your smartphone that you have is a really powerful tool, and it's something that that AI is going to replace. It's something that is going to be just as powerful, but much more further reaching. And I think that when you frame it like that, I think people tend to really identify with the benefits of artificial intelligence. But how far away are we from this stuff? Because I feel like I would love to have some sort of personal assistant that kind of manages all the admin work that I have to do of just being an adult in 2024. But I'd feel like it's always, it's like what they say about fusion technology. Like fusion technology is always 10 years away, right? And so I see the huge leap with like chat gpt, like that chat gpt moment really got a lot of people excited. But realistically, when for people like us that are excited about it, like when can we start expecting this technology to trickle down to actual use cases?
Yeah, I'll give you 3 time horizons.
Mm-hmm.
Within the next 5 years, all of the current limitations associated with LLMs, some of which are just very pragmatic limitations, the cost of them, the uncertain regulatory future, copyright protections, the generation of content that can be dangerous, the guardrails applied to LLMs, a lot of what both technically as well as culturally is holding back broader adoption. In 2023, it's still nascent. Those will go away. So I feel like we'll have answered a lot of the questions around how the technology can be exercised responsibly,
Mm-hmm.
and it will become just kind of part of the connective tissue of work and life as well. And I think that's in the next 5 years.
Mm.
The next 10 years, I firmly believe that every person on the planet will have a handful, probably no more than a dozen, kind of digital, to co-opt the Microsoft term, co-pilots that kind of guide their daily life. And there'll be kind of a digital you that will be accessible on, probably won't be a traditional mobile phone, but a wearable, whether it's a pin or embedded in your clothing. But also what you'll find is that the environment, whether it's your home, your place of work, where you commute, et cetera, will have intelligence built into it. It'll be kind of ambient. And so these kind of sensor networks will be enabled by great advances in compute, throughput, network bandwidth, that sort of thing, which we're on the cusp of. But I think within a decade, we'll see things like quantum computing mature to the point where a lot of those fundamental technological limitations are going to go away and enable this world where you'll get the best advice from these co-pilots, and it won't be creepy. It'll be like, you'll give it a goal. I want to be healthier. I want to, add life to my years. I want to make sure I'm on time more. I want to, I want to spend an extra hour a week with, my kids or with my spouse. So things where you have kind of tangible goals that could better be achieved with the benefit of kind of a digital you version of a co-pilot helping you make better decisions throughout your day. I think that's within a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Within, let's say, I'll go as far out as 30 years. Beyond that, it's a little fuzzy. What I think we're going to start to think about is a different version of species, and not to come across as just too much of, in the realm of science fiction, but this notion of what it means to be a human, I think will change in the next several decades, call it 30 years. I firmly believe the traditional boundaries of what constitutes what are the limitations or what constitutes a carbon-based life form will merge with what constitutes a silicon-based life form. And I believe that we'll just naturally think of ourselves as kind of a combination of the two. So kind of that trend that'll happen in the next 10 years, I think will be amplified over the next couple of decades after that. And what I mean by that is things where there's even some foreshadowing today. So kind of, again, to take it out of the realm of science fiction, when we look at, let's take the Olympics. I think next year we got the next Summer Olympics coming up. And when you see, some of, for example, in the pool, swimsuits made of, new materials, amazing, developments in material science that reduce the friction, against your skin in the water. So even over the past few decades, we've seen things like that change what I think it means to be a human, because we're able to test traditional limits, or prosthetic limbs that are smart enough to, meld themselves to your body. I think anyone with a disability, anyone who's, feels like they've been disadvantaged or held back, there's going to be, AI driven, whether it's prosthetics or things that augment traditional human capabilities that are going to truly empower, the most underserved, the most underprivileged. I believe that, what we talk about as the traditional digital divide will go away. New technologies that are just emerging that feel like science fiction today that will let anyone on the planet, a kid in, an impoverished, town in Zimbabwe will have every access to modern education that, a kid in an affluent area in Boston has today.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's where we're headed in a couple decades. And that's a world that I'm excited to be living in. And I really feel like over the arc of history, to call it 30 years away makes me pretty optimistic that it's going to happen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think that that's a really exciting future to live in. And I think that that's really what sets us back when we're talking to people that are less optimistic, is that they just don't really have that optimistic vision of the future to look towards. I think that there's just so much pessimism associated with the future. Every new technology is associated with, the worst case scenario, which I can understand after having all of this social media explosion and seeing all the negative aspects of that. Everybody realizes that, like, okay, technology might not be just like this amazing thing that we are always interested in getting more of, But I did want to just touch on, because we are talking about extrapolations, and I speak about this with everybody that's in artificial intelligence. Do you think that this is a existential threat to humanity, or how do you feel about that?
I am an AI optimist.
Yeah.
And what I see, certainly, I'm sitting in the cradle of Silicon Valley, is a lot of deep attention being paid to how the technology gets exercised responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
I had an interesting, call it a debate recently on my podcast with a famous AI ethicist named Merva Hickok.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think she's behind the website aiethicist.org.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say she was taking more kind of the doomer side of this debate, and I was taking more of the accelerationist side, or the optimistic side. And I firmly believe, when it comes to that topic, just first off, kind of at a philosophical level, that humans who are brilliant enough to design and deploy these technologies are also brilliant enough to make sure that they don't lead to the demise of humanity. Mm-hmm. So just at a high level, I think that there are a lot of us in kind of that camp that feel like we are thinking through some of these implications. We are embedding kill switches and things that should detect the bots from going rogue. There's always kind of the kind of canonical example of, what we don't want to happen is that, maybe a reference to, the medical field. If you train an AI or if you ask it, you say your job is to eradicate cancer. Well, perhaps the best way to eradicate cancer is to destroy humanity. There won't be cancer anymore. I don't believe that that's likely to happen, because we as a technology community, we are thinking through the implications of things like that. I think it's incredibly important that we get regulation right. Today, the state of regulation, it's immature. Even what's happening with the EU AI Act.
Yeah, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the EU AI Act?
Yeah, I feel like it's certainly a lot further along than the United States. We have the AI Bill of Rights that was proposed, which was, I believe, politics aside, I think it was a political charade. And my concern is that if we, as a tech community, rely on the federal government to enforce these guardrails, we just gave big tech a 10-year, essentially, ability to grade their own homework. And that tends to not work so well. So I think we need, as a community, we need to, this is happening. I don't want to, take the doomer side. Organizations are responsible, and they're thinking about what it means to embed some of these controls into the AI, make sure that, we have a set of kind of a gold standard set of tests to see, what would happen in a, worst case scenario to prevent the bots from going wild. So there is an appetite for self-regulation. I think that every piece of legislation I've seen, whether it's in the EU or what's pending in the United States or in China, Asia, other places. I just think we're naive if we think that the pace of regulation can keep up with the pace of technology.
Yeah.
But I do believe it's the most important issue that we face. I'd mentioned time frame of 5 years to really make sure that we enforce the right guardrails so that mental health isn't affected. And, some of the things that could really go wrong, we're making sure that the bad actors, which there always will be bad actors, aren't allowed to just accelerate, their nefarious behaviors and hack bank accounts and bring down planes and, disrupt the energy grid, things that we were always afraid of, but now could potentially be more accessible with AI. I think we need to pre-answer those questions, but I want to make sure that I make the point that there's an appetite and there's a lot of good work going on. And I'm going to give us the benefit of the doubt that I think we're maybe 5 years away, but that these threats or these dangers are well acknowledged.
I feel like it's going to be more of a symbiotic relationship, just like you were talking about. And so in that symbiotic relationship, AI is going to depend on us and we're going to depend on AI. And so becomes a real need for humans to be around. And I at least I hope that's the case. But it's nice to hear that there are people that are thinking about these things, and I'm sure that might make people feel a little bit better about it. But what I wanted to ask you about is just kind of transition and say, what are you most excited about? Because I feel like there's so many applications for artificial intelligence. It's hard to really pin down things that specifically people can get excited about. And I get most excited about just having like a robot butler, right? Like that's somebody that can, water my plants for me, that can, fold my laundry for me and do it in such a way that it's like seamless, that I could just tell them that and it's not like very difficult. But you having a different perspective, I feel like you probably know some things that maybe our listeners might not realize or think about. So what are you most excited about in regards to artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I'll give you 3 kind of different answers to that question. My life's passion is about improving the work experience. And I want work to no longer be a 4-letter word. And I believe that, we're right on the cusp of a work culture that's aided by technology where everybody gets back probably, 4 to 6 hours per week of productive time. And I firmly believe that in that 4 to 6 extra hours per week, we'll have a decision to make about, do we want to pursue another project at work, or maybe our vision for ourselves is just to get out of the office an hour earlier every day and get to the kids' soccer game, be at the recital, be a better spouse, a parent, a friend, pursue a hobby. Like, I really get excited about a global community where everybody feels like they're the best versions of themselves because they got back that, 4 to 6 hours per week to do the thing that they feel like they were put on the planet to do. So that's, I'm very optimistic. And I think just based on what I know we're doing at PeopleReign, I think that's close. But I'll give you 2 other examples. My kids are 13 and 15, and I think about the world of work, but also just the global society that they're going to be graduating into a couple of years, when they're in the workforce. And I think about all the opportunities that they'll have. We started this conversation about the ethics of AI, and we can talk about how every aspect of our lives, from education to the legal profession, law enforcement, certainly medicine and healthcare, transportation, logistics, hospitality, like, oh my gosh, we are right on the cusp of amazing opportunities to reinvent everything we thought we knew about every one of these fields. So like, as a parent, I'm so excited that my kids have an opportunity to change the world, because like, it's going to take a bunch of smart, ambitious people to make this transformation happen. So that's number 2, which makes me super optimistic. And then the third one is, you well know better than anyone, the population's aging in the United States and around the world. And I think about, take my mom who's aging, and I want nothing more than, for her to have more, as I said earlier, life in her years. And I believe that, some of the advances in technology, a home assistant that, can keep her mind stimulated, and, a home assistant that makes sure, she's cared for and she's got, a wise best friend that's always at her side, and it gets to know her, and like I said, not just stimulates her mind, but keeps her safe and checks in with her, and all the things that again, a lot better than me, that can lead to premature aging. These are logical applications of the technology. So when I think about taking care of the most vulnerable in our population, there's so many obvious advantages that we'll have in a world where some of these AI technologies are mature. That's just kind of a third, aspect of the future that makes me really optimistic about, why we got to keep building.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think is doing some of those things the best? Like, are there any companies that you're just like, man, if they get this right, it's just going to be like another ChatGPT moment?
I'll give you a couple examples. I'm biased because of guests I've had on my podcast and companies I've invested in. So by no means, is this exhaustive, but just, call these just illustrations of what else is out there. Recent guest in the podcast, a guy named Dr. Shiv Rao, who's the founder of a company called Abridge, that is reimagining the patient-doctor experience. And it's predicated on the fact that a lot of, again, you know better than anyone, but a lot of the interactions that patients and doctors have are kind of driven by compliance obligations and regulations, and patients always feel like they're ignored, or that the healthcare system just lacks humanness. And so what Abridge is doing is trying to make it easier using like transcription technology and AI to make sure that doctors can be more present, and have AI write up the notes, summarize the calls, do the things that just kind of create artificial barriers between patients and doctors. So that's one area where in healthcare, specific example, companies called Abridge. There are others like it out there. The company I invested in, another domain, but called Apprentice, develops an AI first adaptive tutoring system for K-8 science and math.
That's what I think is going to be a big deal. I can't wait until that comes to fruition. But anyway, finish your point.
It's changing the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changing the world. It's unbelievable to see what the future of education looks like when you see how much more engaged students are when they have a personalized tutor that learns with them. And it's amazing what the impact is on the classroom setting, where teachers can spend their time. Teachers are literally getting a real-time view of where students are struggling, and they're spending their time one-on-one coaching, mentoring, like doing the things they love with the students who are falling behind. Everybody is made better. And that's why, I take like the example of, underprivileged student in a remote part of the world who, is just, perpetually left behind those who have, the advantages in the Western world of modern technology, et cetera. When I think of just democratizing access to the best educational resources using, AI-based adaptive tutoring, like what Apprentice does, like, oh my gosh. I mean, how could you not be optimistic about what's ahead, knowing that, like, yeah, we've got a set of ethics, and we've got to make sure it's not done in a way that disadvantages or potentially could lead to harm or leads us down weird dark alleys. But I believe we'll solve those problems because the upside and the positive impact on humanity is so significant. It's a problem we must solve. So I'm seeing, in the cradle of where this technology is developed, some of these problems actually being solved. It's just two examples.
Yeah, no, I really like because I have kids too. I have a 2-year-old, and I look at her, and it's almost like a plant, right? It's like you put the right amount of sunlight, you put the right amount of fertilizer, you give it the right amount of soil, and it's going to blossom to its full potential. And I don't think that each plant is the same, right? Each plant needs a different amount of soil, a different amount of fertilizer, a different amount of sunlight, a different amount of water. And for kids, if you have some kid that's like super advanced, you could have this tutor really feed it all the fertilizer for its brain that it needs to be the best version of itself, right? And sometimes in school it's kind of limiting because you're held back by the other people that are in your class, and having an artificial tutor that's able to feed you that information on the pace that you're able to take it in, I think is going to be really, really interesting to watch. And not only just from an educational standpoint, I also think from an emotional standpoint, right? Like there's times where, just as a parent, like either I'm preoccupied or I'm just, feeling bad myself, but like I'm not able to give that kid the amount of emotional support that she needs when necessary, right? And who knows what the long-term ramifications are, they're so resilient, so probably nothing. But what if you did have some sort of artificial best friend that's able to give you kind of the emotional security that you need? I feel like it would just be such a much more fulfilling life for these kids. I really think it's going to be interesting to see the kids that are growing up now and how their interaction with AI is, because so frequently at dinner parties and stuff, I have other friends who have children at the same age, and we talk about how they probably will have a more significant relationship with like a robot or with a some sort of artificial intelligence that's able to meet their needs rather than any other kid in the history of humanity, and who knows what the implications of that. And I think it's going to be a good implications because it's going to give the kid exactly what it needs, whether it's emotionally or educationally, right when it's needed. How do you feel about that? I mean, you have kids. Are you excited about that as well?
I want to have a version of this conversation with you in 3 years when your daughter is in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I think we will have learned so much
Mm-hmm.
between now and then. I certainly believe that your daughter is going to have a vastly different experience in kindergarten than you or I had,
Mm-hmm.
in 100% positive way.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what it means to be a teacher in a kindergarten when every student, first of all, from two or from even birth, they've been enriched, by systems that get to know them and assist the parents. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a replacement for parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that parenting journey doesn't change, but it just might mean that, your daughter starts kindergarten, with a massive advantage versus what you and I had. And all throughout, their educational system, I believe, gone are the days of where, your daughter, I have two daughters, my daughters, have to memorize arcane chemical formulas in OChem like I did. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that was a waste of time. Like, that is not a task. Like, just memorization of chemical formulas is not a task that, certainly nothing that has benefited me. I'm not a doctor, but nothing has benefited me in my professional life. So I think when we peel away all the wasted time that happens, in the educational system right now, and you
Mm-hmm.
introduce more things that are more relevant for whatever profession, your daughter, my daughters choose, to me, like, that's why I'm a big believer in the benefits of pursuing creative skills
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about the ethics of things that will never be automated by a bot. Like, I love the idea of redesigning the educational system so we strip out all the stuff that's mundane and unnecessary and frankly just antiquated. So I mean, just that whole thought about what it means to have a co-pilot as part of your parenting journey. As a parent, I'll feel much better when the school system is completely overhauled. Higher
Yeah.
ed is super broken.
But
Um,
also, I feel like the pressure will be off for parents to like respond to every single need. There's just so much parental pressure that you have to fulfill every little facet of needs that your kids have, whether it's like financial or emotional or educational, like and having a co-pilot, even from a parental perspective, I think is going to be really interesting. I think that's if we frame it in such a way that this is like somebody that is able to take the pressure off from some of these more mundane, but I would argue very important tasks. Like obviously I want to be there for, just like you said, for every recital. I want to be there for, every, time that she falls and hurts herself so that I'm there. But if I can't be there, it would be nice to have something there that is able to help her in my stead, which I think is that to me, I think in regards to co-piloting is going to be much, much more palatable for people who are less optimistic about artificial general intelligence.
yeah,
And I think I don't know if
yeah.
yeah, I
Go
don't know
ahead.
if there's anything out there like that, but I think that would be really interesting.
I believe that a lot of these, assistive technologies,
Hmm.
for your kids, my kids, but also maybe for kids who have learning disabilities or other things. I think that as a parent, the next generation of parents and kids will have a better relationship
Hmm.
because their safety won't be something that as a parent you're as concerned about, or what happens to them when they're in school. I think it'll be easier to supplement what they're getting when they're not under your direct supervision, and feel good that the digital version of them delivered through apps or services or bots that you trust, and you have access to the guardrails, and you have access to what recommendations they're making, and you control the targets or the what it is that you want those digital companions to do. Assuming we get all that piece right, which is very critical, I think we enter a world where as parents, we can focus on doing the things that we as human parents do best, which is love our kids and treat them with respect, and be excited about all the enrichment that we bring to them, and not feel like when they're out of our direct supervision somehow something could go wrong. I think I don't think it's too Pollyanna-ish to say that's what's ahead.
Do you worry about incentives? Because I feel like when you're talking about it's too Pollyanna-ish, you have this idea that like that's what's coming down the pipeline. And I think a lot of people, especially with like just all of the negatives with social media technology, or just maybe even capitalism just in general, like the incentives are such that it's meant to use human beings like a commodity, right? And to gain attention in the interest of financial profit. Do you worry that that's something that might get in the way of some of these more humanistic philosophies that you're talking about?
We have a saying in Silicon Valley that if you're not paying, you're the product. And so I think it is incumbent on parents to understand what those capitalistic motives are behind the services that they use. And I believe we're in need of a reset. Social media, I think, caught a lot of us off guard. I think certainly coming up in not just in the United States but globally, 2024 is a big year for elections around the world. And I think one of the challenges, to your point, is we need to always make sure we understand what the source is, who was motivated to produce the content that we see. I believe we're going to be having this conversation certainly in the next 12 months, if not for the next decades, about what is truth. Can you believe the thing that the celebrity said, was it synthetically generated?
Was it a deep fake or not? Or
I mean, so there is going to be a level of responsibility that we can't outsource, and we certainly can't assume that big tech, which to your point, publicly traded big tech has a profit motive. So we always need to be careful. And it may mean that, these services won't be cheap or free. We may choose to pay for them, because only when you pay for them can you unlock the capabilities that will allow us to trust them. I think that's a really important theme for at least the next year is, what does it mean to be living in potentially, I know this is, a more dystopian view or a term, but what does it mean to be living in a post-truth world? And how can we get more comfortable asking those questions about, what was the motive behind this content that I'm consuming that potentially could have significant ramifications on, me or people I love?
I think AI is actually going to be more beneficial with that, because, just the amount of time that it takes to fact check stuff is just too much for most people. And just to have somebody that you could easily ask, just be like, hey, is this real? And AI tells you, no, it's not, it's a deep fake or something like that. I think that's going to be much more helpful. But I did want to talk about, we don't have a lot of time left, but my production team told me, just like myself, you're really big into science fiction, and especially utopian science fiction is something that I always love talking about, because I don't know if enough people are exposed to that to realize that like there are so many beneficial possibilities that other people have thought about. What do you feel like is maybe like the shining star for you when it comes to like, okay, if we could get there, that would be really awesome? Like for me, it's Star Trek. I feel like post scarcity society where the technology is something that's a real help, and just like what you were saying, most of the admin stuff is gone, and we can just focus on being the best version of ourselves. They're not working like a 3-day work week or anything like that, but still like they're working hard at bettering themselves, at exploring, at making new and interesting advancements for society. But like, what about yourself?
Yeah, I love this topic. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
So 2 book recommendations. One is a book called Life 3.0 by
Okay.
a professor at MIT named Max Tegmark. it gets slightly dystopian, and it was written, I think, close to a decade ago, but it's still relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And I share a lot of his vision, or some of the reality. I think it takes place, I think, 30 years out, maybe it's 20 years now. Another good book is a one that was recently published. Dr. Kai-Fu Lee was the first head of Google China, became a venture capitalist. And now he actually runs one of the most successful AI companies in China. But he actually wrote or co-authored a book with 8 kind of tales from around the world, different cultures, and how I think it probably is only a decade into the future, but what life will be like. A lot of what I believe, it's both consistent with what Dr. Kai-Fu Lee and Max Tegmark talk about in their books, but I believe in this future that's not too far off, where a day in the life is very different from what it is now, in that technology is so deeply integrated into our lives that we no longer think about ourselves as cyborgs, or we no longer, it doesn't feel like dystopian science fiction. It feels very utopian, because again, like I said earlier, we give one of our dozen co-pilots a directive, and I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I make the optimal decisions based on my values or my priorities every day. And as a techno optimist, I would love to feel like I'm being guided through my day, and whether it's a daily budget, or how much time should I leave to get to the airport, like even mundane things like that. Like you walk into the office and the conference room's booked for you, and the new hire that you have has a laptop sitting on her desk when just the things that gum up the works. I believe that if you go throughout your day, every day, you or I could probably come up with 60 examples of where life would be better, if we just had a wise friend that was always there and us and cared
I got you, Dan. It's like, it just says, I got you. I'm gonna order that laptop. I'm gonna book that conference room. It's just ready to go. I totally agree. I think that's something that I really look forward to. It's just and I always tell just the admin work of being a human being in 2024. It's just overwhelming. Honestly, just taxes and insurance, and is the cable bill paid? I have to automate all this stuff, because otherwise I wouldn't be. But I would love to have some sort of wise friend that's just checking up on this stuff for me. I would love that, and I can't wait till that happens. But personally, I think that if you look at science fiction, all utopian societies, whether it's Star Trek, or Isaac Asimov series, or whatever it is, where human beings really have this really amazing experience of life, AI is the common denominator in all of these things, right? We have to have this technology to get to the next level, where a lot of the things that like the admin work, labor, just scarcity in general. I think for us to move past those, we have to have some help with fixing these big problems. And I think that whether we like it or not, we have to address this issue, and it's coming. And that's the thing. It's I feel like a lot of the fear that's coming out of this is oh my God, we just need to pump the brakes, and we can't pump the brakes. We got to address this issue now, so that it has the most benefit for our society. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with that?
Roll back the clock to the 18th century and ask the Luddites in England how it worked out for them, to be on the wrong side of innovation. And there are countless other examples, the printing press, or the automobile, so many examples of where those who feared technology were left behind. And this is another case where the argument for slowing down because of the dangers AI could propose, which are very real, I feel like is much more dangerous than speeding up. Because in a lot of cases, as we think about the ethical challenges, or some of the potential downsides, we can't accelerate our ability to react to the downside until we first agree as a community to continue innovating. That's always what has advanced society. And certainly this time it's, the stakes are higher, the technology is better, the pace of innovation has never been faster. But as a community, I feel like, we need to keep embracing, all the positives that are already, the result of, these massive advances in technology, and really keep our eye focused on, all the big global problems that it will solve, and know that, we are smart enough, we do care enough about the future of the human race that, that this shared vision for the future that we've been talking about should be, enough motivation to continue innovating.
Yeah, I hope so. So last question before we get into the three questions that I ask all my guests. How do you feel about work from home? Because I know that artificial intelligence is and the intersection with work is really significant for you, but it varies depending on the person. So I just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were, because like my wife is a big proponent of it. I'm not a big proponent of it, and it's just a discussion that we have. So how do you feel about it?
I will caveat this comment with one of the important nuances about work from home is that it doesn't apply to everyone. And I realize that those who may be, working multiple jobs or frontline workers or in certain professions, they don't have the luxury of being able to have this conversation. So I really respect that, it's easy for you and I, with all the benefits, all the privileges that we have.
Yeah, I don't have the ability to do that.
Okay.
I have to go to the operating room. There's no operating room in my house yet. So
I've got a cushy desk job. I spend a lot of time on airplanes, but otherwise I'm just always very respectful of all the,
right.
all the employees who really make the world work, that, for whom that said, look, I'm on Team Human, and I believe that, using technology to make us the best versions of ourselves is the planet that I want my kids, to inherit. So, for employees who are also caregivers at home, whether it's for, elderly parents, or maybe they're disabled, not as mobile, or, they have to supplement their work with childcare or something like that. I fully embrace that. I don't want to stigmatize work from home. And I'm glad that, the pandemic forced us to have this conversation. I also, believe in the power of teams and collaboration. I think a lot of that, they're some of the most innovative corporate cultures have figured out a way to accommodate hybrid work without disadvantaging employees, or, creating some kind of a cultural bias, So I believe that what's right for the employee is also what's right for the employer. And so I'm firmly in the camp of there's no one right answer other than what's best for the human doing the work.
Yeah. The way that I look at it is like, I really like the culture of work. Like, you leave your office, or you leave your house, you go into the office, you have a cup of coffee with like your friends from work, and like that creates a certain sense of camaraderie with them. And the people that you see on a daily basis, I just feel like that's something that I would really miss. But to be quite honest with you, I've never really had the luxury of working from home. Like, I always have to go into the hospital and put my time in. But I it's just something that me and my wife talked about, and especially with somebody like you who really has this keen interest in AI and the intersection with work. I just wondered what your opinion was. But it's really interesting to talk to you. We do have to close very soon, but I did want to end the conversation with the same three questions that I ask the majority of the people that come on to the show. The first of which is inspiration, right? Like for me, a lot of my inspiration for the things that I do is science fiction and just cutting edge technology. For whatever reason, it just like really gets me excited. And I think that it's different for different people. So what it really inspires you? Like what do you look towards for your inspiration?
Yeah. Given the why that I described at the top of the conversation, it should come as no surprise that I derive inspiration from my customers. I consider them, all my companies, but certainly at PeopleReign, they're why we do it. We have this vision, we're out to impact 1 billion lives at work. And so I encourage everyone on my team to spend as much time as you can learning about, what inspires our customers, because that has to be what inspires us. So I don't like traveling for work, but I'm always happy to be on a plane anywhere, anytime, to be able to learn from our customers. And that's always the greatest source of inspiration is, when it becomes not just academic. A bunch of the stuff we've been talking about seems kind of academic. Well, it's very real when you sit, in a call center in Manila, or, you talk to, a kid out of college who says, this product is giving me back 6 hours a week. So that's always, with respect to my vision and my why, that's always been my source of inspiration.
That's cool, man. Well, I really appreciate that answer. So let's fast forward 10 years. What do you think that work is going to look like, specifically with AI being a huge component of it? Are we going to be working 3 days a week, or are we going to be, working from home, and everything is going to be robotics? Like, what do you think is going to be what work looks like?
Yeah. The future of jobs is such that we will not have one business card with one, logo on it, and, you punch a clock and you go to work every day. I believe in what we talk about as a work net versus a workforce. And credit to a gentleman named Dr. Gary Bowles, great guest on the podcast, on my podcast, but who also is passionate about this. And the idea is that your career will be kind of stitched together based on passion projects that you have. So the work net will consist of ad hoc teams brought together with specialists, and everyone's just there to perform some, or create some output, some product or service. And around the table is just people who are there because they love what they're doing. And when you extract all the friction, all the, like you said, the paying your taxes and whatever craziness comes up in the course of your day, and all the time at work is spent just doing the thing you love, it'll be very easy to have this, job 2.0, where you're actually doing a bunch of different things with a bunch of different ad hoc teams, potentially for different companies, a little bit like an extension of what gig work is today, that liberates you from, a lot of the tedium of work. I believe that's within a decade, we'll be talking about that work net versus the workforce.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. That'll be really cool to see. There's like so many passion projects that I have like bumbling around that I don't have the time to expand upon. Okay, last question I ask a lot of the people that are in artificial intelligence that are on this podcast about. So what do you think is going to be the next big chat GPT moment? Like, is it going to be full self-driving? Is it going to be robot butlers? Like, what is going to be like the next big thing that makes us like shift our mentality the same way that chat GPT did?
The dirty little secret of LLMs is that they are large language models, and we think of them almost like they're sentient, which they're not. And we think of them as being capable of performing a broad range of tasks that they can't actually perform. Like I mentioned at the top, they're great at generating credible nonsense, and they're great at programming tasks and things that are just pattern recognition. They do math. They're getting better at math. They haven't always been great at it. But one of the things that is overlooked is the fact that large language models are text-based. Increasingly, we're incorporating some very rudimentary video and image capabilities into them. But what we need to appreciate is that 99% of the world's data is not text. And so the next big innovation is going to happen when we can incorporate spatial data, a knowledge about the world that we actually live in. What it means to, feel wind on your face, and, what it means to hear the sound of traffic and know when to cross the street, and, the sound of the jet engine when it takes off from the runway, or, the feeling of being at a concert, in a concert hall, and hearing, the clash of the drums, or, things like that really represent the totality of human experience. LLMs don't do any of that. And so to me, the next, real breakthrough, real innovation is when large language, or the equivalent or the extension of AI first large language models actually get extended to understand the spatial world.
Yeah. Is full self-driving a component of that, or is that something separate? Like, I feel like that's kind of related, but that's really what they're struggling with, right? Is like these edge cases, but I don't know if that's something that is related to what you're saying.
You made a reference earlier, and we use the same words to describe self-driving, where it's perpetually a decade away. And in part because it is really a problem that requires spatial awareness of the world. And we're trying to solve it using, traditional data and machine learning techniques.
Yeah. And
that to me is why, I think it's mature enough if you're talking about, driving grandma around in a golf cart in a retirement community where there's little traffic, there aren't bad actors. Like, it's a very safe place, and a great example of where, full autonomous self-driving, I think, is mature for use cases like that. But for the real world of traffic and unexpected events and bad weather, and it's really hard to design AI first systems to take into account all of that. And that's what holds back full self-driving. But I do believe when AI has spatial awareness, we'll rapidly turn a corner. We'll no longer perpetually be a decade away from self-driving cars.
So how far away are we from that, the spatial awareness that you're talking about, would you say?
The technology exists in labs today. I believe that within 5 to 7 years, we'll commercialize it.
Awesome. That's really interesting. I can't wait till that happens. I can tell you that right now. I'm going to be the first in line for that, whatever company is able to figure that out. But anyway, so nice to speak with you. All the best with what you're doing with PeopleReign. For those of you guys who are listening on a regular basis, please feel free to like and subscribe. And Dan, thanks for being with us. And thank you guys for listening. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Dr. Awesome.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.